Have you ever spent the entire night with your mind racing, thoughts spinning endlessly? That anxiety that won't let you rest? You are not alone in this. Most people try to force their minds to stay quiet, fighting against every thought that appears, and this only makes everything worse. But Buddhist monks discovered something different thousands of years ago. They realized that trying to control your thoughts is exactly what keeps you trapped in them. When you stop fighting and simply observe your thoughts as if they were clouds passing in the sky, without holding on to any of them, something extraordinary happens. The mind begins to calm itself naturally, without effort. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, I will share Zen stories that will teach you exactly how to do this. You will learn to transform that mental whirlwind into deep peace, just by changing the way you relate to your own thoughts. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment which part of the world you are watching from. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Have you ever wondered why Zen Buddhism has captured the imagination of so many people seeking inner peace in our chaotic world? The story of how this unique branch of Buddhism developed offers fascinating insights into its enduring appeal. Zen Buddhism traces its origins to China around the 6th century, where it was known as Chan Buddhism before later flourishing in Japan as Zen. The traditional account holds that an Indian monk named Bodhidharma brought these teachings to China, becoming the first patriarch of Chan Buddhism. When he arrived, Bodhidharma famously spent 9 years in meditation facing a wall at the Shaolin Monastery, demonstrating the intense focus on meditation that would become Zen's hallmark. What made Zen distinctive from other Buddhist traditions was its direct approach to enlightenment. While many Buddhist schools emphasized extensive study of sutras and gradual progression through stages of practice, Zen proposed that enlightenment could be experienced directly, beyond words and concepts, through disciplined meditation and mindful awareness in everyday activities. The core philosophy of Zen suggests that inner peace isn't something to be achieved through external means or intellectual understanding, but rather something to be discovered within ourselves. It's already there, only obscured by our restless thoughts and attachments. This perspective represented a significant shift from approaches that treated peace as a distant goal to be reached after years of arduous practice. Early Zen masters developed unique teaching methods to help practitioners transcend dualistic, analytical thinking that causes mental agitation. They recognized that the very act of seeking peace could become an obstacle to finding it. This paradox led to teaching approaches that often seemed puzzling or even nonsensical to the uninitiated. For instance, when asked about the nature of Buddha, Master Yunmen simply replied, "A dried piece of dung." Such responses, known as koans, were designed to short-circuit logical thinking and open the mind to direct experience. As Zen evolved in China under influential teachers like Huineng and Mazu Daoyi, it emphasized that enlightenment was not something exotic or separate from ordinary life. The famous saying, "Before enlightenment, ... Wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water captures this practical orientation. The difference lies not in what you do, but in how you do it, with a mind fully present and at peace rather than constantly chasing after thoughts. When Zen was transmitted to Japan starting around the 12th century, it found fertile ground in Japanese culture. Monks like Eisai and Dogen studied in China and returned to establish the Rinzai and Soto schools of Zen in Japan. Under their guidance and that of their successors, Zen profoundly influenced Japanese aesthetics, arts, and daily life. The Zen philosophy of inner peace differs markedly from Western approaches to tranquility. Rather than trying to achieve peace by rearranging external circumstances or through positive thinking, Zen suggests that true peace comes from seeing through the illusion of a separate self that constantly needs defending, promoting, and satisfying. When we realize at a deep level that there is no solid, unchanging self to protect, many sources of mental agitation naturally subside. Simplicity and spontaneity are highly valued in Zen as expressions of the enlightened mind, in contrast to complexity and calculation. This is beautifully exemplified in Zen arts like calligraphy, poetry, and garden design, where seemingly simple expressions often reveal profound depths when contemplated. The spare aesthetic of a Zen rock garden, for instance, creates space for the mind to settle into natural peace. In Zen monasteries, every aspect of daily life becomes an opportunity to cultivate awareness and inner peace. From formal meditation sessions to cooking, cleaning, eating, and working in the garden. All activities are approached with full attention. This integration of practice with everyday life made Zen particularly accessible and relevant, even as it maintained rigorous training methods. The transmission of Zen teachings has traditionally occurred from heart to mind, or mind to mind, beyond words and concepts. While sutras and texts exist in the Zen tradition, they are considered secondary to direct experience and the living guidance of a realized teacher. This emphasis on direct transmission highlights the understanding that true peace comes from abandoning excessive conceptualization rather than accumulating more knowledge. Zen's approach to inner peace is perhaps best summarized in the advice often given to beginning meditators. Just sit. This instruction contains the profound insight that peace is not something to be constructed or achieved through effort, but rather our natural state when we stop creating problems through our thinking. As Zen master Shunryu Suzuki famously said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." The Zen path recognizes that our normal state of consciousness, constantly judging, comparing, wanting, and fearing, creates a perpetual state of subtle agitation. By practicing Zazen, seated meditation, and bringing mindful awareness to everyday activities, practitioners gradually see through the habitual patterns of thought that disturb natural tranquility. Throughout its long history, Zen has offered a countercultural perspective that challenges our usual assumption that more possessions, more achievements, more experiences leads to greater happiness. Instead, it points to the possibility of finding profound peace and satisfaction in the simple act of being fully present to whatever is happening right now. This radical simplicity continues to attract people from diverse backgrounds who sense that our society's emphasis on constant striving and acquiring may not deliver the peace we seek. In a world of increasing complexity and stimulation, Zen's direct pointing to our inherent capacity for inner peace remains as relevant today as it was when Bodhidharma first sat facing a wall over 1400 years ago. How Zazen meditation calms the agitated mind. Picture yourself sitting still in a quiet room, back straight, eyes half closed, simply breathing. This seemingly simple practice, Zazen meditation, has been at the heart of Zen Buddhism for centuries and has helped countless practitioners transform their relationship with their own restless thoughts. Zazen, which literally means seated meditation, is the cornerstone practice of Zen Buddhism. Unlike some forms of meditation that involve visualization or mantras, Zazen is remarkably straightforward in its approach. The practitioner sits in a stable posture, traditionally on a cushion with legs crossed in lotus or half-lotus position, though alternatives exist for those with physical limitations. The back is kept straight but not rigid. Eyes are kept slightly open with a soft downward gaze, and attention is placed on the breath or simply on being aware of whatever arises in the present moment. What makes this practice so effective at calming the agitated mind? To understand this, we need to look at how our minds typically operate. Most of us spend our days with our attention scattered in countless directions. We ruminate about past conversations, worry about future events, judge our experiences, plan our next actions, and engage in endless internal commentary. This constant mental activity creates a state of subtle but persistent agitation that many of us have come to accept as normal. During Zazen, the practitioner learns to take a different approach to thinking. Rather than identifying with thoughts or trying to control them, the meditator simply allows thoughts to arise and pass without getting caught up in them. This is often described as watching thoughts float by like clouds in the sky, or sitting by a river watching leaves drift past. The key insight is that you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness that observes thinking happening. This shift in perspective is profoundly calming because much of our mental suffering comes from over-identification with our own thoughts. we tend to believe our thoughts, take them personally, and react emotionally to them as if they were reality itself. Zazen creates space between awareness and thinking, allowing us to see that thoughts are just mental events, not facts, not commands we must obey, and not accurate representations of reality. Modern neuroscience has begun to validate the effects of Zazen on the brain. Research shows that regular meditation practice reduces activity in the default mode network, the brain regions responsible for mind-wandering and self-referential thinking. It also strengthens the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in attention regulation and emotional control, while reducing activity in the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center that triggers stress responses. One of the most remarkable aspects of Zazen is that it works not by forcibly suppressing thoughts but by changing our relationship to them. Many beginning meditators make the mistake of trying to stop thinking, only to find themselves frustrated when thoughts continue to arise. Zen teachers often explain that trying to stop thoughts is like trying to smooth ripples on water by pressing them with your hand. You only create more disturbance. Instead, Zazen cultivates a state that Japanese Zen traditions call mushin, or no mind. This doesn't mean being thoughtless, but rather not being dominated or controlled by thinking. As the practice deepens, practitioners report experiencing increasingly longer intervals of genuine mental quietude, not forced, but naturally arising as the mind's habitual agitation settles down. Dogen, the 13th century Japanese Zen master who founded the Soto school, described Zazen not as a means to an end, but as the direct manifestation of our inherent Buddha nature. From this perspective, each moment of Zazen isn't about achieving calmness in the future, but about embodying peaceful awareness right now, regardless of whether thoughts are present or not. The regular practice of Zazen gradually retrains the mind's habitual patterns. Many practitioners report that after establishing a consistent meditation practice, they become more aware of their thoughts during daily activities and can more easily disengage from unproductive thinking. The space between stimulus and response widens, allowing for greater choice in how to respond to challenging situations rather than reacting automatically. Another way Zazen calms the agitated mind is through the cultivation of equanimity, the ability to be with whatever arises without pushing away unpleasant experiences or clinging to pleasant ones. This quality develops as meditators practice accepting all mental states with the same open awareness, whether they're experiencing calm, boredom, irritation, or joy during their sitting. The physical aspects of Zazen also contribute significantly to its calming effects. The emphasis on proper posture, sitting with spine erect, shoulders relaxed, and chin slightly tucked, creates physical conditions that support mental clarity. The slow, deep breathing that naturally occurs during Zazen activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the stress response and induces physical relaxation that supports mental calmness. Zazen is traditionally practiced in multiple periods throughout the day in Zen monasteries. During intensive retreats called sesshin, practitioners might meditate for 8 to 10 hours daily, with sessions typically lasting 25 to 40 minutes, interspersed with walking meditation, kinhin. This intensive practice creates opportunities for deeper insights into the nature of mind and more profound states of calm. For lay practitioners adapting Zazen to busy modern lives, even shorter daily sessions of 15 to 30 minutes can produce noticeable benefits. Many experienced meditators report that consistency is more important than duration. A short daily practice is more transformative than occasional longer sessions. Some find that starting the day with Zazen sets a tone of mindful awareness that carries through their activities, while others find evening practice helps release the accumulated tensions of the day. It's important to understand that Zazen's goal isn't to eliminate thinking entirely. Thinking is a valuable function of the mind when applied appropriately. Rather, the practice helps us develop the ability to use thinking as a tool when needed and set it aside when it's not useful. This skill, being able to think when thinking is required and to rest in non-conceptual awareness when it's not, is perhaps the greatest contribution Zazen makes to mental well-being. As the mind grows calmer through regular Zazen, practitioners often report experiencing greater clarity, heightened sensory awareness, increased emotional resilience, and a deeper sense of connection with others and the world. These benefits emerge not as dramatic spiritual experiences, but as subtle shifts in how we relate to ourselves and our lives. The beauty of Zazen lies in its simplicity and accessibility. While historically practiced within a Buddhist framework, the core technique requires no particular beliefs or cultural background. The instructions are straightforward: sit, breathe, be aware. Yet the practice offers a direct path to addressing one of humanity's most universal challenges: the restless, agitated mind that prevents us from experiencing the peace that is already here. While Zazen meditation forms the foundation of Zen practice, another distinctive element that has fascinated both practitioners and observers is the use of koans. These enigmatic paradoxes serve as powerful tools for helping students break through the limitations of logical thinking and experience reality directly. Koans are puzzling questions or statements that deliberately defy rational analysis. Perhaps the most famous koan is, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Others include, "What was your original face before your parents were born?" Or the seemingly nonsensical statement, "The cypress tree in the courtyard." These mind-bending riddles aren't meant to be solved through intellectual reasoning. Instead, they're designed to exhaust the analytical mind and create an opening for direct insight. The tradition of using koans developed primarily within the Rinzai school of Zen Buddhism in China during the Tang and Song dynasties, between the 7th and 13th centuries. Masters noticed that many students became attached to intellectual understanding, mistaking conceptual knowledge for genuine realization. Koans emerged as a skillful remedy to this tendency, forcing practitioners beyond the comfort zone of rational thought. When a student is assigned a koan, they're expected to meditate on it continuously, both during formal zazen and throughout daily activities. This sustained inquiry creates a state that Japanese Zen calls great doubt, not skeptical doubt, but rather an intense, questioning awareness that penetrates deeply into one's being. As the student repeatedly runs into the limitations of logical thinking when trying to solve the koan, mental tension builds. The beauty of koans lies in their carefully crafted nature. They often contain traps for the intellect. Any conceptual approach you take leads to a dead end. For instance, if you try to explain the sound of one hand clapping by saying silence ... you've missed the point by creating another concept. The koan isn't asking for a clever answer. It's inviting you into a different way of knowing altogether. Working with koans isn't a solo endeavor. The relationship between teacher and student is essential in this practice. Students periodically meet with their teacher in private interviews called dokusan or sanzen to present their understanding of the koan. The teacher can immediately discern whether a student's response comes from genuine realization or clever intellectual maneuvering. Those who offer memorized or calculated answers are typically sent back to continue their contemplation. What makes koans effective is how they utilize paradox to short-circuit our habitual thinking patterns. The human mind strongly prefers consistency and logic. When confronted with something that cannot be resolved logically, the mind initially struggles, then may eventually surrender, creating an opening for insight that transcends conceptual thinking. This moment of breakthrough is called satori or kensho in the Zen tradition. Historical records contain numerous accounts of practitioners who experience sudden awakening after prolonged wrestling with a koan. A monk might spend years contemplating mu, Master Joshu's response when asked if a dog has Buddha nature, only to have understanding dawn when hearing the sound of a pebble striking bamboo or a temple bell ringing. These awakenings typically come when the logical mind has exhausted itself, often during ordinary moments rather than in formal meditation. Koans operate on multiple levels simultaneously. While they appear nonsensical at first glance, many contain subtle references to Buddhist teachings or earlier dialogues between masters and disciples. They often embody the central Zen insight that reality cannot be captured in concepts or words, it must be experienced directly. As one master put it, koans are fingers pointing to the moon, with the understanding that one shouldn't mistake the finger for the moon itself. Different Zen lineages approach koans differently. The Rinzai school typically employs systematic koan study, with students progressing through collections like the Gateless Gate or Blue Cliff Record. The Soto school, while not emphasizing formal koan study as much, nevertheless incorporates the spirit of koans in its teachings and sometimes uses them informally. Many contemporary Western Zen teachers adapt koan practice to make it accessible to modern students while preserving its essential function. Critics sometimes misunderstand koans as nonsensical riddles meant to demonstrate that life is absurd or that logical thinking has no value. This misses their purpose entirely. Koans don't reject rationality, they simply reveal its limitations. Logical thinking remains valuable for navigating much of daily life, but it becomes an obstacle when we try to understand the deepest questions of existence through concepts alone. Koans help us develop a more flexible relationship with thinking itself. Neuroscientists studying the effects of koan practice have observed interesting patterns. When someone reaches an impasse with logical thinking, brain scans show increased activity in areas associated with conflict monitoring. Then, during moments of insight or realization, there's often a burst of gamma wave activity followed by a new pattern of neural integration. This suggests that koans may actually help rewire the brain to enable more holistic forms of perception. Working with koans cultivates a quality of mind that remains valuable long after any particular insight. Students develop the ability to hold contradictions without immediately rushing to resolve them, to see beyond either-or thinking, and to rest in not knowing, a state of open receptivity that often leads to creative breakthroughs in many domains of life. The peace that comes through koan practice differs from the calmness of concentration meditation. Rather than a tranquil surface, it's more like discovering the stillness at the bottom of the ocean, unaffected by the waves of thought above. This peace emerges not from eliminating mental activity, but from seeing through its hypnotic power and recognizing a dimension of awareness that thinking neither creates nor disturbs. Beyond formal Zen settings, the spirit of koan practice continues to influence contemporary culture. The puzzling questions that scientists confront at the frontiers of physics, the creative breakthroughs that artists experience when they abandon familiar approaches, and the insights that emerge in psychotherapy when clients step back from their habitual narratives, all these share something with the koan tradition. They point to the possibility of knowing that transcends our usual conceptual frameworks. While Zazen and koan practice may seem like specialized activities done in specific settings, Zen Buddhism has always emphasized that realization must extend into everyday life. This brings us to another essential aspect of Zen practice: cultivating mindfulness in all daily activities. Mindfulness in Zen goes far beyond formal meditation periods. It extends to every aspect of daily life: eating, walking, working, conversing, and even the most mundane tasks like washing dishes or sweeping floors. This comprehensive approach reflects the Zen understanding that enlightenment isn't separate from ordinary reality, but is found precisely within it. In Zen monasteries, every activity becomes an opportunity for practice. Meals are taken in a highly mindful ritual called oryoki, where each movement, from arranging bowls to eating each bite to cleaning up, is performed with complete attention. Walking between meditation periods becomes kinhin, or walking meditation, with each step taken in full awareness. Even cleaning is approached as samu, or work practice, with the same quality of presence one brings to seated meditation. This integration of mindfulness into all activities distinguishes Zen from approaches that treat meditation as something separate from regular life. As the saying goes, Zen is not some kind of excitement, but concentration on our usual everyday routine. The goal is to dissolve the boundary between formal practice and everyday living until one's entire life becomes an expression of awakened awareness. Thich Nhat Hanh, the renowned Vietnamese Zen master who passed away in 2022, was particularly influential in making everyday mindfulness accessible to contemporary practitioners. He developed simple practices like mindful breathing while stopping at red lights, using the telephone bell as a reminder to come back to the present moment, or taking mindful walks where each step becomes an opportunity to arrive fully in the here and now. What does mindful activity actually look like in practice? When eating mindfully, for instance, you give full attention to the sensory experience, the colours and textures of the food, its aromas, the flavours that develop as you chew, the sensations of swallowing. You notice the movements of your hands and utensils, the thoughts and feelings that arise, all without getting lost in planning or remembering. Each bite becomes complete in itself rather than merely a means to satisfaction or fuel for later activities. This quality of presence transforms ordinary experiences. Tasks that might normally feel like burdensome chores become opportunities to experience life directly. The practitioner discovers that peace and satisfaction aren't found in special circumstances, but in bringing full awareness to whatever is happening right now. As one Zen saying puts it, when hungry, eat semicolon. When tired, sleep. The simplicity of this statement belies its profound implication that complete presence in ordinary activities is itself enlightenment. Scientific research has begun to validate the benefits of this approach. Studies show that people who eat mindfully typically consume less food, enjoy it more, and digest it better. Those who work mindfully make fewer errors and experience less stress and burnout. Mindful communication leads to better relationships and fewer misunderstandings. These findings aren't surprising from a Zen perspective. The quality of awareness we bring to any activity directly affects our experience of it. Mindfulness in daily life also helps us recognize habitual patterns that cause suffering. Many of our difficulties come from automatic reactions based on past conditioning rather than responses appropriate to the present situation. By bringing awareness to these patterns as they arise, we create the possibility of choosing differently. This doesn't happen through force of will, but through the natural wisdom that emerges when we see clearly. One common misconception about mindfulness is that it requires moving slowly or adopting a special, serious demeanour. While beginners sometimes slow down activities to help establish awareness, mature mindfulness can be maintained during regular speed activities and is compatible with humour, joy, and natural expression. Zen masters are often portrayed as spontaneous and lively, demonstrating that mindfulness doesn't mean becoming rigid or mechanical. The practice of everyday mindfulness addresses a fundamental challenge of meditation: the tendency to create a split between spiritual states experienced during formal practice and ordinary states during the rest of life. By bringing the same quality of awareness to all activities, this artificial division begins to heal. The practitioner discovers that the peace found in Zazen isn't limited to the meditation cushion, but is available in every moment. In practical terms, how does someone begin cultivating everyday mindfulness? Many teachers suggest starting with one routine activity, perhaps brushing teeth, washing hands, or preparing morning coffee. By bringing full attention to this one activity consistently, the practitioner develops the muscle of mindfulness and can gradually extend it to other parts of the day. Another approach is to set reminders, perhaps the sound of bells, phone notifications, or transitions between activities, as cues to return to present moment awareness. The Japanese tea ceremony, Chado, represents perhaps the most refined expression of everyday mindfulness in Zen culture. What could be simpler than preparing and drinking tea? Yet every movement in the ceremony, from arranging the utensils to whisking the matcha to offering the bowl, becomes an opportunity for complete presence. The ceremony cultivates awareness not just in the host but in the guests as well, creating a shared experience of presence that transcends ordinary social interaction. This practice of bringing mindfulness into daily activities complements formal meditation by creating continuity of awareness throughout the day. Rather than seeking special experiences or trying to escape ordinary reality, the practitioner learns to find depth and meaning precisely in the activities that make up daily life. As awareness deepens, the boundary between practice and life gradually dissolves, revealing that they were never truly separate. This practice of bringing mindfulness to everyday activities naturally leads us to examine more closely who exactly is experiencing all these moments. One of the Buddha's most profound and often misunderstood teachings addresses precisely this question, the concept of non-self, or anatta in Pali. This teaching directly challenges our deeply held assumptions about who we are and offers a path to mental peace by addressing the very root of our psychological suffering. The concept of non-self doesn't claim that you don't exist, obviously. You're here reading these words. Rather, it suggests that what we typically think of as our self, a fixed, separate, independent entity that remains constant over time, is actually not findable when we look closely. Instead, what we call self is more accurately understood as a dynamic process, a collection of changing physical and mental phenomena without any fixed core or essence. This insight might sound abstract or philosophical, but its implications for mental peace are immediate and practical. Consider how many of our disturbing thoughts and emotions arise from self-preoccupation, worry about how others perceive us, comparison with others, defensiveness when criticized, pride when praised, anxiety about maintaining our self-image, and the endless inner narrative centered around me and my story. The Buddha recognized that this excessive self-concern is at the root of much of our mental agitation. When we begin to investigate our experience closely through mindfulness practice, we start to notice something interesting. The body is constantly changing, cells dying and being replaced, sensations arising and passing. Feelings and emotions come and go like weather patterns. Thoughts appear and disappear like bubbles. Perceptions shift depending on conditions. Even consciousness itself is not continuous but flashes moment by moment. So where in all this flux is the solid, unchanging self we imagine ourselves to be? In Zen practice, this investigation often takes the form of asking questions like, "Who am I?" Or "Who is thinking?" Or "Who is experiencing this moment?" Not to arrive at a conceptual answer, but to look directly at experience itself. When done sincerely, this inquiry can lead to a loosening of our rigid self-identification and the freedom that comes with it. One common misunderstanding is that the teaching of non-self means we should try to eliminate the sense of self, as if it was something bad. This approach actually reinforces the very problem it seeks to address by creating a new project for the self to accomplish. Instead, the teaching invites us to simply see through the illusion, recognizing how the sense of a separate self is constructed moment by moment through habit and conditioning. In Zen monasteries, masters often use direct questions to help students experience this insight. A student might complain about disturbing emotions, and the teacher asks, "Who is disturbed?" Or a student might report a profound experience, and the teacher asks, "Who had this experience?" These questions aren't meant to elicit philosophical answers, but to direct attention to the living reality of this moment. The peace that comes from understanding non-self isn't achieved by forcibly dismantling the ego. Rather, it emerges naturally as we see through the solidity we've attributed to our sense of self, when we realize we don't need to constantly defend, promote, or worry about a fixed self-image. Many sources of mental agitation naturally subside. We become less defensive because there's no solid me to defend. We compare ourselves less to others because the boundaries between self and other are recognized as more fluid and conventional than absolute. Recent neuroscientific research offers interesting parallels to this ancient wisdom. Studies of brain activity show that what we experience as a unified, continuous self is actually constructed by various neural networks working together. There's no single self-center in the brain. Just as Buddhist psychology has long suggested, there's no single, essential self to be found in our experience. The practical benefits of this understanding become apparent in everyday interactions. When someone criticizes you, and you don't take it as an attack on your essential self, but simply as words arising from their conditioning and perspectives, you can respond more clearly without the cloud of emotional reactivity. When you succeed at something, and you don't solidify that into, I am a successful person, you avoid both the inflation of pride and the fear of failing next time. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless or disconnected. Paradoxically, as identification with a separate self loosens, genuine compassion and connection with others often increase. This happens because the boundaries we mentally construct between ourselves and others, boundaries that form the basis for indifference or aversion, are recognized as more permeable and conventional than we previously thought. The peace that comes from understanding non-self is not about becoming nobody. It's about becoming less fixated on being somebody in particular. It's the freedom that comes when we stop squeezing our fluid, ever-changing experience into rigid categories of identity. The mind that isn't constantly occupied with self-maintenance, protecting its image, reviewing its past, planning its future, naturally rests in a more peaceful state. In Zen, this insight isn't considered exotic or special, but simply a clear seeing of what has always been the case. As one Zen saying puts it, the 10,000 things return to the one. Where does the one return to? The recognition that there is no solid, separate self doesn't lead to nihilism or despair, but to a more authentic engagement with life, free from the constraints of excessive self-concern. The peace that comes from loosening our grip on fixed identity connects directly to the Buddha's fundamental diagnosis of the human condition and his prescription for alleviating suffering. While the concept of non-self addresses one specific aspect of how we create our own mental distress, the Buddha's broader teaching framework provides a comprehensive approach to understanding and transforming all forms of suffering. Over 2,500 years ago, Siddhartha Gautama, who would later be known as the Buddha or Awakened One, embarked on a quest to understand and overcome human suffering. Born into privilege as a prince in what is now Nepal, he was deeply moved by encountering sickness, old age, and death during rare ventures outside his palace. These experiences prompted him to leave behind his comfortable life and seek answers to the fundamental questions of human existence. After 6 years of intense seeking, including periods of extreme asceticism that nearly killed him, Siddhartha finally discovered a middle way between indulgence and self-mortification. Sitting in meditation under what became known as the Bodhi tree, he experienced a profound awakening to the nature of mind and reality. What he discovered formed the basis of Buddhism, and its relevance to calming our thoughts remains as powerful today as it was millennia ago. The cornerstone of the Buddha's teaching is the Four Noble Truths, a diagnostic framework that identifies the problem of suffering, its cause, the possibility of its cessation, and the path leading to that cessation. This framework doesn't require religious belief, but invites us to investigate our own experience, much like a doctor diagnosing an illness and prescribing treatment. The first noble truth acknowledges that suffering, dissatisfaction, or unease, dukkha, is a universal part of human experience. This isn't a pessimistic view, but a realistic starting point. From minor irritations to profound grief, from subtle feelings that something is missing to obvious physical pain, suffering touches every life. The second noble truth identifies the cause of suffering as craving or clinging, tanha. The Buddha observed that we suffer not merely because unpleasant experiences occur, but because we relate to all experience, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, with habits of craving and aversion. We cling to what we like, push away what we don't like, and ignore what seems irrelevant. These habitual reactions create a state of constant tension and dissatisfaction. The Third Noble Truth offers hope by declaring that suffering can be ended. If suffering arises from craving and clinging, then the cessation of these habits leads to the cessation of suffering. This state of freedom from suffering is called nirvana, which literally means blowing out, like extinguishing the flames of craving that keep us in constant distress. The Fourth Noble Truth presents the path leading to this liberation, the Noble Eightfold Path. This comprehensive approach includes right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right in this context doesn't mean politically correct, but rather skillful or appropriate ways of thinking and acting that lead to well-being rather than suffering. In describing the untrained mind, the Buddha often used the simile of a monkey swinging from branch to branch in the forest, never able to be still. He observed how our thoughts jump constantly from past to future, from desire to aversion, from self-concern to worldly matters, creating a perpetual state of agitation. The practices he taught aimed to calm this monkey mind, not by forceful suppression, but by understanding its nature and cultivating healthier mental habits. One key insight the Buddha offered is that our thoughts are not facts, but mental events that arise based on causes and conditions. Just as we don't take our dreams to be reality, we can learn to hold our waking thoughts more lightly, recognizing them as passing phenomena rather than absolute truths. This doesn't mean dismissing all thinking as meaningless, but developing a wiser relationship with the thinking process. The Buddha taught that much of our suffering comes from ignorance, avijja, not factual ignorance, but a fundamental misunderstanding of our experience. We take what is impermanent to be permanent, what is unsatisfactory to be satisfying, what is not self to be self, and what is unbeautiful to be beautiful. These basic misperceptions keep us chasing after what cannot bring lasting happiness and resisting what cannot be avoided. The path to mental peace involves gradually seeing through these misperceptions through both intellectual understanding and direct experience. The Buddha emphasized that his teachings should not be accepted on faith, but tested through one's own investigation. "Be a lamp unto yourselves," he told his followers, encouraging them to verify the teachings in the laboratory of their own lives. Meditation practices form an essential part of the Buddha's prescription for calming the mind. He taught a wide range of techniques, from focused concentration, samatha, that develops mental stability and tranquility, to insight meditation, vipassana, that cultivates clear seeing into the nature of experience. These aren't separate paths, but complementary aspects of mental training, like the two wings of a bird. Through concentration practices, the mind learns to stay with a chosen object, like the breath, without constantly wandering. This develops a quality of mental calm that serves as the foundation for insight. Through insight practices, we observe directly how all phenomena, including our thoughts, feelings, and sensations, arise and pass away, are subject to change, and are not mine or myself. This direct seeing gradually frees us from the grip of habitual reactions that create suffering. The Buddha's approach to mental liberation is practical and empirical rather than theoretical or faith-based. He compared his teachings to a raft used to cross a river, useful for the journey but not something to be carried once the destination is reached. The teachings aren't dogmas to believe but tools to use for calming the mind and freeing it from unnecessary suffering. In essence, the Buddha discovered that our minds create most of our suffering through how we relate to experience, and he developed a systematic approach to transforming these mental habits. The peace that results isn't dependent on perfect external conditions, but comes from seeing clearly and responding wisely to whatever conditions arise. This is the real freedom the Buddha pointed to, not freedom from experiencing life's natural ups and downs, but freedom from the unnecessary suffering we add through our reactions to those experiences. The Buddha's systematic approach to freeing the mind from suffering wasn't just a collection of philosophical ideas, but included practical guidance for daily living. Central to this guidance is what became known as the middle way, a balanced approach that avoids extremes and offers a sustainable path to mental peace. The concept of the middle way emerged from the Buddha's own experience. Prior to his awakening, he had tried two extreme approaches. First, the life of indulgence as a prince surrounded by pleasures, and later, the life of severe asceticism, starving himself almost to death in the belief that punishing the body would liberate the spirit. He discovered that neither extreme led to genuine understanding or freedom from suffering. The path of excessive self-indulgence kept him trapped in cycles of craving and satisfaction, while the path of self-mortification weakened his body and mind without producing insight. This personal discovery led him to teach the middle way as an approach that acknowledges our physical and emotional needs without becoming enslaved by them. This principle extends beyond lifestyle choices to our mental attitudes as well. Just as we can find balance in our external habits, we can also develop balanced approaches to thinking and emotion that support mental tranquility. In meditation practice, the middle way manifests as balanced effort, neither too tense nor too relaxed. Many beginning meditators struggle with finding this balance, either straining so hard to concentrate that they create more agitation or becoming so passive that their mind drifts into dullness and sleepiness. Experienced meditation teachers often help students find that sweet spot where effort is steady but not forced, alert but not tense. This balanced approach is sometimes described in Zen as effortless effort, or trying without trying, a paradoxical state where we're fully engaged but not straining. In Chinese Taoism, which influenced Zen Buddhism significantly, this quality is called wu wei, or non-doing. It doesn't mean doing nothing, but rather acting with such alignment to the natural flow of things that action feels effortless. The principle of the middle way extends to how we relate to our thoughts as well. One extreme approach is to identify completely with thoughts, believing everything that passes through our mind and being carried away by the stories we tell ourselves. The opposite extreme is trying to forcibly suppress thoughts, declaring war on our own mental processes. Neither approach leads to peace. The middle path involves observing thoughts with gentle awareness, neither getting entangled in them nor pushing them away, but allowing them to arise and pass naturally. In everyday life, the middle way offers practical guidance for activities like eating, sleeping, working, and socializing. With eating, for instance, we can notice how both overeating and undereating create physical discomfort and mental agitation. Moderate, mindful eating supports both physical health and mental clarity. Similarly, balancing work with rest, solitude with social connection, and activity with stillness creates conditions favorable for a naturally calm mind. Even our approach to spiritual practice itself benefits from the middle way. Some practitioners become extremely rigid about their practice, turning meditation or mindfulness into another source of stress and self-judgment. Others are too casual, meditating only when it's convenient or abandoning practice at the first sign of difficulty. A balanced approach acknowledges the value of regular practice while maintaining flexibility and self-compassion. In Zen monasteries, the schedule typically reflects this balanced approach. While the daily routine is structured and disciplined, with early morning meditation, work periods, meals at regular times, and evening practice, there are also breaks, informal tea times, and occasional special events that prevent life from becoming mechanical or severe. This rhythm supports a sustainable practice that calms the mind without creating additional stress through rigidity. The middle way isn't about mathematical precision or finding the exact midpoint between extremes. It's more like tuning an instrument. We're looking for the tension that produces harmony, which might vary depending on conditions. Sometimes we might need a bit more discipline, other times more gentleness. The key is developing the awareness to recognize when we're veering toward one extreme or another, and the wisdom to adjust accordingly. Stories from Zen tradition often show masters correcting students who have fallen into extreme views or practices. A student who becomes too attached to formal meditation might be assigned physical work. One who intellectualizes too much might be given a practice that engages the body. Another who neglects study in favor of meditation might be directed to certain texts. These interventions aren't arbitrary but reflect the understanding that balance is essential for genuine progress. Modern life often pulls us toward extremes, whether it's the constant stimulation of digital media, intensive work schedules, or idealized notions of success that lead to burnout. The middle way offers a corrective to these tendencies, reminding us that sustainable well-being comes from balance rather than excess in any direction. Scientific research increasingly supports this ancient wisdom. Studies on sleep show that both too little and too much are associated with health problems and cognitive impairment. Research on exercise shows that moderate, regular activity generally produces better long-term outcomes than extreme training followed by periods of inactivity. Work on nutrition suggests that sustainable, moderate approaches to healthy eating are more effective than severe diets that can't be maintained. The concept of the middle way might sound simple, but putting it into practice requires ongoing awareness and adjustment. Our tendencies toward extremes are often deeply ingrained. We might have been raised to equate effort with strain, to see relaxation as laziness, or to value quantity over quality. Changing these patterns takes time and compassionate self-observation. What makes the middle way particularly valuable for calming the mind is how it addresses the roots of agitation rather than just the symptoms. Mental restlessness often comes from imbalance, pushing too hard, neglecting basic needs, or swinging between overexertion and collapse. By cultivating balance in our activities and attitudes, we create conditions where the mind naturally becomes more peaceful. This balanced approach to life connects directly to another key teaching that supports mental tranquility, the art of living in the present moment. While finding the middle way helps create favorable conditions for peace of mind, fully inhabiting the present moment is perhaps the most direct path to experiencing that peace directly. Living in the present moment might sound simple, but it's surprisingly uncommon in our daily experience. Most of us spend significant portions of our day with our attention somewhere other than where we actually are. We physically sit in a meeting while mentally rehearsing future conversations. We drive home while ruminating about workplace conflicts. We eat dinner while scrolling through social media. We lie in bed while anxiously anticipating tomorrow's challenges. This division of attention, what some Zen teachers call half-presence, is a primary source of mental agitation. When we're not fully present, we miss the only moment where peace can actually be experienced, now. The past exists only as memory, the future only as imagination. Both memory and imagination happen now, as current mental activities. If we're constantly using our present moment awareness to dwell on the past or project into the future, we never actually experience the peace that's available right here. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh captured this insight in his simple instruction. The present moment is the only moment available to us, and it is the door to all moments. This isn't a philosophical statement, but a practical observation. When we're fully present, engaging completely with whatever we're doing, whether it's washing dishes, talking with a friend, solving a problem at work, or simply breathing, a natural sense of peace and aliveness emerges. The central Zen practices of Zazen, seated meditation, and mindfulness in daily activities are essentially training in present moment awareness. They help us recognize when we've drifted into rumination about the past or anxiety about the future, and they strengthen our ability to return attention to the here and now. with regular practice. The gaps between being lost in thought and remembering to be present gradually shorten. A key insight that supports living in the present is recognizing that most of our suffering doesn't come from what's actually happening right now, but from our thoughts about what happened in the past or might happen in the future. When we examine our mental distress closely, we often find that we're reacting not to current reality, but to memories, projections, interpretations, or scenarios we've constructed in our minds. Consider physical pain. For instance, there's the actual sensation in the moment, but much of our suffering comes from thoughts like, "This shouldn't be happening." "What if this never stops?" Or, "Why does this always happen to me?" These thoughts create a layer of mental anguish on top of the physical experience. When we bring full attention to just the sensation itself, moment by moment, without adding the story, the experience often becomes more manageable. The same principle applies to emotional pain. When we feel sad, anxious, or angry, these emotions themselves are just temporary energy patterns in the body and mind. What turns them into suffering is how we relate to them, resisting them, identifying with them, or creating narratives around them that extend their duration and intensity. Present moment awareness gives us the space to experience emotions directly without these additional layers of reactivity. Japanese Zen master Rinzai captured the essence of present moment living in his famous instruction: "When walking, just walk. When eating, just eat." This teaching points to the simplicity and completeness that become possible when we give our full attention to whatever we're doing. The qualifier, just, is important here. It suggests dropping the extra mental activities we typically add to our experiences, the commentary and comparison that take us away from direct contact with life. The traditional Japanese tea ceremony, chado or the way of tea, exemplifies this art of complete presence. What could be simpler than preparing and drinking tea? Yet by approaching this ordinary activity with full attention, participants have the opportunity to experience extraordinary depth and tranquility. Every gesture, from heating the water to whisking the matcha to cleaning the utensils, becomes complete in itself, not a means to an end, but the very expression of awakened awareness. Modern neuroscience offers interesting parallels to these ancient teachings about present moment awareness. Research on the default mode network, DMN, a set of brain regions active during mind-wandering and self-referential thinking, shows that this network is highly active when we're ruminating about the past, worrying about the future, or otherwise engaged in narrative thinking about ourselves. When the DMN is very active, areas associated with present moment sensory awareness and attention tend to be less active. Meditation practices that cultivate present moment awareness have been shown to decrease DMN activity and increase activity in attention networks. This shift correlates with reports of greater peace, less rumination, and increased well-being. In essence, the brain can't be fully engaged with processing current sensory information while also maintaining elaborate narrative thinking. They compete for resources. One of the most powerful aspects of present moment living is how it frees us from getting stuck in particular mind states or identities. When we're fully present, we're not defined by our history or our projections about the future. We have access to a kind of freshness and freedom that isn't available when we're operating primarily from memory and anticipation. Each moment becomes a new beginning, an opportunity to respond creatively rather than react based on old patterns. Zen stories often illustrate this potential through accounts of people experiencing sudden awakening when their habitual thought patterns are interrupted, bringing them forcefully into the present. A monk might be pondering a philosophical question when the sound of a pebble hitting bamboo brings him instantly to presence, revealing what words and concepts could not. These aren't magical transformations, but examples of what becomes possible when the thinking mind temporarily steps aside and direct experience takes center stage. Living in the present doesn't mean we never think about the past or future. planning, learning from experience, and setting intentions are all valuable activities. The key difference is whether we're using memory and imagination as tools when they're helpful, then returning to present awareness, or whether we're habitually lost in thought, missing the life that's actually happening now. Present moment awareness allows us to use thinking rather than being used by it. The peace that comes from fully inhabiting the present moment isn't dependent on circumstances being ideal. It comes from dropping the constant comparing, judging, and wanting that characterizes much of our normal mental activity. When we're not mentally fighting with reality as it is right now, wishing for something else, somewhere else, or someone else, we discover a basic okayness that's always available, regardless of external conditions. This present moment awareness that we've been discussing naturally leads us to another core aspect of Zen practice: inner silence. While living in the present helps us break free from the constant pull of past and future, cultivating inner silence allows us to experience the depth and wisdom that exists beneath the surface-level chatter of our minds. When we talk about silence in Zen, we're not just referring to the absence of external noise, though that can certainly be helpful. More importantly, we're talking about an inner quieting, a settling of what Buddhists sometimes call the monkey mind. That restless internal voice that jumps from thought to thought, constantly commenting, judging, planning, and worrying. This internal noise often drowns out deeper insights and keeps us in a state of perpetual mental agitation. In Zen monasteries, external silence is often maintained for extended periods. This isn't an arbitrary rule, but a practical condition that supports practitioners in noticing and working with their own internal noise. When external distractions are minimized, we can more clearly observe the activity of our own minds. Many people who attend their first silent retreat are shocked to discover just how noisy their minds actually are when there's nothing to drown out the internal chatter. The relationship between external and internal silence is interesting. While external quiet can support inner silence, true inner quiet doesn't depend on external conditions. Advanced practitioners can maintain inner stillness even in noisy, chaotic environments. Conversely, someone can be in a perfectly quiet setting but experience tremendous internal noise. The goal of Zen practice isn't to eliminate all external sound, but to develop the capacity for inner silence regardless of outer conditions. This inner silence isn't about suppressing thoughts or creating a blank mental state. It's more like allowing the sediment in a glass of muddy water to settle naturally. When we stop stirring up the water with constant mental activity, clarity emerges on its own. Thoughts may still arise, but they no longer dominate our awareness or compel us to follow them. There's a spaciousness around thinking, a background of aware silence in which thoughts appear and disappear. One of the most important distinctions in Zen is between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is information we acquire and store, facts, concepts, theories, memories. Wisdom, prajna in Sanskrit, is direct insight that emerges when the conceptual mind temporarily steps aside, allowing us to see reality without the usual filters and projections. While knowledge is accumulated, wisdom often emerges from silence, those gaps between thoughts where direct perception becomes possible. Many Zen stories highlight the limitations of intellectual understanding and the wisdom that can emerge from silence. There's the famous story of the professor who visits a Zen master to learn about Zen. As they sit for tea, the master keeps pouring until the cup overflows, despite the professor's protests. The master explains that, like the overflowing cup, the professor's mind is so full of his own ideas and opinions that nothing new can enter. This story points to the necessity of emptying our minds of preconceptions, creating inner silence before genuine understanding can occur. In Zen training, there are many instances where a student approaches a master with a carefully prepared question or statement, only to be met with silence. A simple gesture, or an unexpected response that cuts through their conceptual thinking. These interactions aren't meant to be cryptic or dismissive, but to point the student toward the limitation of words and concepts and the direct understanding that can emerge from inner silence. The silence cultivated in Zen isn't passive or dull, but vibrant and alert. There's a quality of receptivity and openness, what some teachers call listening with the whole being. This quality of awareness notices not just external sounds, but subtle aspects of our experience that are usually overshadowed by our internal commentary. We might notice the play of light and shadow, subtle bodily sensations, emotional currents, or the simple fact of being alive in this moment. Modern neuroscience offers some interesting perspectives on what might be happening during states of inner silence. Research shows that the default mode network, brain regions active during self-referential thinking and mind-wandering, can temporarily quiet down during meditation, especially in experienced practitioners. This correlates with reports of mental quiet, reduced self-preoccupation, and greater clarity and presence. There's also evidence that regular meditation increases grey matter density in brain regions associated with attention, sensory processing, and self-awareness. The wisdom that emerges from inner silence often has distinctive qualities. It tends to be more holistic than analytical, seeing connections and patterns rather than breaking things down into separate components. It's usually direct and immediate rather than being mediated through concepts or past knowledge. And it often comes with a sense of clarity and certainty that's different from the tentative, provisional nature of much conceptual knowledge. In daily life, cultivating inner silence creates space for insight to emerge naturally. How many times have you struggled with a problem, thinking about it constantly, only to have the solution appear when you stop trying, perhaps while taking a shower, going for a walk, or just as you're falling asleep? These are everyday examples of how stepping back from excessive thinking creates room for wisdom to arise. The inner silence developed in meditation gradually extends into daily activities. Practitioners often report experiencing gaps between thoughts becoming longer and more frequent, not just during formal practice but throughout the day. These gaps aren't empty or vacant but full of aware presence. They create space for more appropriate responses to situations instead of automatic reactions based on conditioning. Paradoxically, genuine inner silence often leads to more authentic and effective communication. When we're not constantly rehearsing what we're going to say next or filtering everything through our preconceptions, we can actually listen to others more fully and respond more appropriately. Our words tend to be clearer and more to the point, arising from direct understanding rather than habitual patterns or the need to impress. The quality of inner silence in Zen is sometimes compared to the space inside a bowl or the empty center of a wheel hub. These spaces aren't nothing, they're what make the bowl useful for containing things and the wheel able to turn. Similarly, inner silence isn't an absence or void, but the spacious awareness that allows all experience to be held and understood. It's not something exotic or separate from everyday life, but the background context that allows life to unfold more harmoniously. This cultivation of inner silence naturally gives rise to another essential quality on the path to peace: compassion. When the noise of self-centered thinking quiets down, we naturally become more attuned to others and their experiences. The boundaries that usually separate my problems from your problems begin to soften, and a more inclusive concern emerges spontaneously. Compassion, or karuna in Sanskrit, is considered inseparable from wisdom in Buddhist teachings. While wisdom sees the true nature of reality, compassion responds appropriately to suffering. They're often described as the two wings of a bird, both necessary for flight. In Zen, the cultivation of compassion isn't seen as separate from the development of wisdom through meditation and mindfulness. They arise together and support each other. At its core, compassion is the natural response of a clear mind to suffering. When we're not caught up in our own stories and preoccupations, We can recognize that all beings want to be happy and free from suffering, just as we do. This recognition creates a natural resonance with others' experiences and a spontaneous wish to help when possible. The practice of compassion begins with ourselves. Many people are surprised to discover how harsh and judgmental they are toward themselves, constantly criticizing, comparing, and finding themselves lacking. Zen teachings point out that this self-aggression is both unnecessary and unhelpful. It creates inner tension and division that prevent the mind from settling into its natural peace. Self-compassion doesn't mean self-indulgence or making excuses for harmful behaviors. It means relating to our own suffering with the same kindness and understanding we might offer a good friend. When we make mistakes, rather than adding a layer of self-condemnation on top of the natural consequences, we can acknowledge what happened, take responsibility, learn from it, and move on without dragging along the additional burden of self-judgment. As we develop more compassionate relationships with ourselves, this naturally extends to others. We recognize that others' unskillful behaviors, like our own, come from their conditioning and their attempts, however misguided, to find happiness and avoid suffering. This doesn't mean we approve of harmful actions, but we can respond with understanding rather than hatred or contempt. Zen practitioners often engage in specific practices to cultivate compassion. One traditional approach is metta or loving-kindness meditation, where we systematically direct well wishes toward ourselves, loved ones, neutral persons, difficult people, and eventually all beings. Another practice is Tonglen, or sending and taking, where we visualize taking in others' suffering with our in-breath and sending out relief and happiness with our out-breath. These formal practices help rewire our habitual tendencies towards self-preoccupation. The effects of compassion practice can be quite tangible. Studies show that regularly practicing loving-kindness meditation increases positive emotions, decreases negative emotions like anger and anxiety, and even produces measurable changes in the brain, particularly in regions associated with empathy, emotional regulation, and positive feelings. People who practice compassion meditation also typically report feeling more connected to others and less isolated. One common misconception about compassion is that it's a weak or passive response to the world's problems. In Zen, quite the opposite is true. Compassion is seen as a powerful, active force that can motivate us to address suffering in all its forms, whether through direct aid, systemic change, or helping others develop the inner resources to deal with inevitable difficulties. Some of the most socially engaged and effective change makers have been motivated by compassion rather than anger or ideology. Another misconception is that compassion always feels warm and fuzzy. Authentic compassion can sometimes take fierce forms, like a parent stopping a child from running into traffic or a teacher giving challenging feedback when needed. What makes an action compassionate isn't how it feels emotionally, but whether it's genuinely aimed at reducing suffering and promoting well-being, with awareness of what's actually needed in the situation. The relationship between compassion and peace is bidirectional. On one hand, as our minds become more peaceful through meditation and mindfulness, we naturally become more attuned to others' needs and more able to respond compassionately. On the other hand, acts of compassion tend to reduce self-preoccupation, which is a major source of mental agitation. Each quality reinforces the other. Zen stories often illustrate how realized masters naturally express compassion without calculation or deliberation. There's no sense of, I should be compassionate, or look how compassionate I am. Just an appropriate response arising from clear seeing. This spontaneous compassion flows from the recognition that we're not separate from others in the way we habitually think. Their suffering and their joy are not fundamentally different from our own. In practical terms, incorporating compassion into daily life might mean taking a moment to consider how our actions affect others, listening more carefully when someone is speaking, offering help when appropriate, or simply acknowledging others' humanity with a smile or kind word. It might mean working to address systemic causes of suffering through our professional work or volunteer efforts. Or it might mean sharing practices and insights that have helped us find greater peace with those who might benefit. The practice of compassion helps break the cycle of self-preoccupation that keeps our thoughts agitated and our minds restless. When our concern extends beyond our own comfort and convenience, we gain perspective on our problems and access to a broader sense of meaning and purpose. Many people report that their most peaceful and satisfied moments come not when everything is perfect for themselves, but when they're contributing to others' well-being in some way. The compassionate awareness we cultivate extends not only toward others, but also toward our own inner experiences, including difficult thoughts and emotions. This brings us to another essential practice in the Zen approach to mental peace: acceptance. Far from being a passive resignation, acceptance in Zen is a powerful tool that transforms our relationship with disturbing thoughts and challenging experiences. When uncomfortable thoughts or emotions arise, anxiety, anger, fear, jealousy, or self-criticism, our instinctive reaction is often to fight against them. We might try to suppress them, argue with them, distract ourselves, or judge ourselves for having them. Paradoxically, these efforts to eliminate unwanted thoughts typically amplify them and increase their hold on us. As the saying goes, what we resist persists. Acceptance offers a different approach. Rather than waging war against our own experience, we practice meeting thoughts and emotions with an attitude of allowing and curious awareness. We acknowledge, yes, this is what's happening right now, without adding layers of judgment, resistance, or elaboration. This doesn't mean we endorse or agree with the content of disturbing thoughts, just that we acknowledge their presence without getting into a struggle. A common misunderstanding about acceptance is that it means passivity or resignation, simply putting up with difficult situations that could be changed. In Zen practice, acceptance has a more nuanced meaning. It refers to acknowledging reality as it is in this moment, which paradoxically creates the mental clarity and emotional space needed for effective action when action is appropriate. Imagine you're stuck in heavy traffic and running late for an important meeting. Non-acceptance might involve tensing up, mentally fighting against the reality of the traffic, repeatedly checking the time, and creating stories about how terrible the consequences will be. This mental resistance creates suffering beyond the simple fact of being delayed. Acceptance would mean acknowledging I'm in traffic and feeling anxious about being late without the extra layer of mental struggle. From this clearer state, you might calmly call to let someone know you're running late, use the time to mentally prepare for the meeting, or consider alternative routes, all more effective than mental resistance. In formal meditation practice, acceptance is often directly cultivated. When difficult emotions or physical discomfort arise during sitting, rather than immediately shifting position or getting lost in thoughts about the discomfort, we're invited to bring curious attention to the actual sensations. What does anxiety actually feel like in the body right now? And where do I feel it? Is it static or changing? This direct, accepting attention often reveals that what we label as a solid emotion is actually a complex, changing flow of sensations, thoughts, and impulses. When seen clearly, these elements often shift and sometimes dissolve entirely. Zen teachers sometimes use the metaphor of making space for difficult experiences, rather than trying to eliminate anxiety. For instance, we create enough mental spaciousness to hold it without being defined or controlled by it. We might acknowledge there's anxiety here rather than I am anxious, a subtle but powerful shift in perspective that creates some breathing room around the experience. The famous Zen parable of the two monks and the woman illustrates the freedom that comes with acceptance. Two monks encounter a woman unable to cross a muddy road. The first monk carries her across despite their vows not to touch women. Hours later, the second monk, still upset, says, "How could you carry that woman?" "We've taken vows." The first monk replies, "I put her down back at the river. Are you still carrying her?" This story highlights how non-acceptance, continuing to mentally resist a past situation, creates unnecessary suffering long after the actual event has ended. Research in clinical psychology has validated the effectiveness of acceptance-based approaches. Studies on what's called acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, show that accepting difficult thoughts and feelings, rather than struggling with them, significantly reduces their impact and helps people take action aligned with their values despite inner discomfort. Similarly, research on how people cope with chronic pain reveals that those who practice acceptance often experience less suffering and disability than those who focus on controlling or eliminating pain. The practice of acceptance doesn't come naturally to most of us, especially those raised in cultures that emphasize control and positive thinking. It's a skill developed through consistent practice. Many find it helpful to start with accepting milder discomforts before working with more challenging emotions. With practice, we develop greater capacity to be with difficulty without being overwhelmed by it. In Zen monasteries, the rigorous daily schedule and sometimes austere conditions provide plenty of opportunities to practice acceptance, whether it's sitting in meditation despite physical discomfort, eating whatever food is served without complaint, or working in the garden during unpleasant weather. Monks develop the ability to meet each experience with equanimity rather than resistance. For lay practitioners, everyday inconveniences offer similar opportunities. Being stuck in line at the grocery store, dealing with a computer crash, or receiving criticism can all become occasions to notice our habitual resistance and practice a more accepting approach. These small daily practices gradually rewire our relationship with more significant challenges. Acceptance also extends to our own limitations and imperfections. Many people maintain harsh internal standards and berate themselves for not meeting their ideals. Zen practice encourages a more compassionate relationship with our humanness, acknowledging mistakes and shortcomings without harsh judgment, seeing them as natural parts of being human rather than personal failings that define our worth. The peace that comes through acceptance isn't about liking or wanting difficult experiences. It's about reducing the additional suffering we create through resistance, judgment, and elaboration. When we can meet life's challenges with this too rather than not this, we discover a deeper freedom, not freedom from difficulty, but freedom within it. This practice of acceptance naturally connects to another fundamental Buddhist teaching that supports mental peace: the recognition of impermanence, anicca. Our resistance to experiences often stems from not fully acknowledging their transient nature. When we deeply understand that everything changes, both the pleasant and the unpleasant, we can hold our experiences more lightly and suffer less when change inevitably occurs. Impermanence is one of the 3 marks of existence in Buddhist teaching. Along with dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and anatta, non-self, it points to the fact that nothing in our experience stays the same from moment to moment. Our bodies, thoughts, emotions, relationships, possessions, achievements, all are in constant flux, arising and passing based on countless conditions. While intellectually we might acknowledge that everything changes, we often live as if the things we care about will remain stable. We become attached to pleasant states, wanting them to continue indefinitely. We resist unpleasant states, treating them as if they're permanent afflictions rather than passing phenomena. This misalignment between reality, constant change, and our expectations, stability, creates much of our mental suffering. Zen practice invites us to observe impermanence directly rather than just understanding it conceptually. In meditation, we might notice how sensations in the body are constantly changing, arising, shifting, and dissolving. We observe thoughts appearing and disappearing like bubbles. We watch emotions intensify and fade. This direct observation helps us internalize the truth of impermanence at a deeper level than intellectual understanding alone. One practical benefit of recognizing impermanence is how it helps us relate to difficult experiences. When we're going through something painful, grief, illness, conflict, failure, remembering this too shall pass can provide genuine comfort and perspective. This isn't about dismissing or minimizing our pain, but recognizing its transient nature, which helps us avoid getting stuck in the belief that this is how it will always be. Similarly, awareness of impermanence can help us appreciate positive experiences more fully. When we recognize that a beautiful sunset, a moment of connection with a loved one, or a period of good health won't last forever, we might engage with it more completely instead of taking it for granted. There's a bittersweetness to this awareness, but it often deepens our appreciation rather than diminishing it. Impermanence also applies to our thoughts and beliefs. When we recognize that our current viewpoints, opinions, and self-concepts are not fixed truths but temporary constructions subject to change, we hold them more lightly. This creates greater cognitive flexibility and openness to new information, qualities associated with both wisdom and psychological well-being. In Zen monasteries, impermanence is sometimes dramatically demonstrated. There are stories of masters drawing beautiful sand mandalas only to destroy them upon completion, or creating ink paintings that will fade with time, or even burning a wooden Buddha statue to keep warm on a cold night. These aren't acts of disrespect, but vivid teachings on the folly of clinging to forms that will inevitably change or disappear. For lay practitioners, awareness of impermanence might be cultivated through simple daily reflections. We might notice seasonal changes in nature, observe how our moods shift throughout the day, or contemplate how our bodies and relationships have changed over the years. Some practitioners find it helpful to reflect on their own mortality, not in a morbid way, but as a reminder of life's preciousness and the importance of using our limited time wisely. Modern science strongly supports the Buddhist emphasis on impermanence. Physics shows us that even apparently solid objects are mostly empty space with particles in constant motion. Biology reveals how our bodies replace their cells regularly, with different tissues renewing at different rates. Neuroscience demonstrates how our brains constantly rewire themselves based on experience. These scientific perspectives can complement contemplative insights into the changing nature of reality. The recognition of impermanence naturally leads to a loosening of attachment. When we truly understand that nothing lasts, grasping tightly to things, people, states of mind, or identities makes less sense. This doesn't mean we don't care deeply or commit fully to what matters to us. Rather, it means we do so with an awareness of transience that brings both poignancy and freedom to our engagement with life. This loosening of attachment doesn't lead to indifference or disconnection. Paradoxically, many practitioners report feeling more deeply engaged with life and more genuinely connected to others when they're not trying to hold on so tightly. Like hands that can feel more when they gently touch something versus gripping it tightly, our awareness can be more sensitive and responsive when it's not clenched in attachment. The freedom that comes from recognizing impermanence isn't about escaping from life's realities, but engaging with them more fully and authentically. We can care deeply, love wholeheartedly, and work diligently for what matters while acknowledging that everything, including ourselves, is in constant flux. This perspective helps us navigate change with more grace and resilience, finding stability not in unchanging external circumstances but in our capacity to be present with whatever arises, moment by moment. Understanding impermanence and practicing acceptance aren't just theoretical concepts in Zen Buddhism, they've been embodied by countless practitioners throughout history. The stories of Zen masters who transformed their restless minds into sources of wisdom and peace offer both inspiration and practical guidance for our own journeys. These accounts, preserved in collections like The Gateless Gate, The Blue Cliff Record, and Transmission of the Lamp, show how real people have applied these principles in their lives and reached profound states of tranquility. One of the most famous stories involves Huineng, the sixth patriarch of Zen in China. Born to a poor family, he was illiterate but had a naturally sharp mind. While working as a firewood seller, he overheard someone reciting the Diamond Sutra and experienced a moment of clear insight. Drawn to Buddhism, he travelled to the monastery of the fifth patriarch, Hongren. When Hongren wanted to choose a successor, he asked disciples to compose poems expressing their understanding. The head monk, Shengxiu, wrote on a wall, "The body is the Bodhi tree, the mind like a bright mirror's stand. Wipe it clean of dust repeatedly. Don't let it gather grime." Huineng, working in the kitchen and unable to write, asked someone to inscribe his response. "Bodhi is not a tree, nor the mind a mirror stand. Since nothing exists, where can dust collect?" This poem demonstrated Huineng's direct insight beyond conceptual understanding. Recognizing this depth, Hongren secretly transmitted the patriarchy to him in the middle of the night. This story illustrates how peace comes not through constant effort to maintain a pure mind, but through seeing the empty, impermanent nature of thoughts themselves. Another telling account concerns the Japanese master Hakuin, who experienced a breakdown due to excessive, imbalanced practice. After pushing himself too hard in meditation, he developed what we might now call burnout or anxiety disorder. His body felt on fire. He was constantly fearful and couldn't sleep or concentrate. Seeking help, he visited an old hermit named Hakuyu, who taught him a meditation technique involving visualizing a ball of butter melting at the top of his head, slowly flowing down and cooling his entire body. This practice balanced Hakuin's energy and restored his health. He later taught that genuine Zen practice should strengthen both body and mind, not sacrifice one for the other. Hakuin's story shows how true peace isn't achieved through forceful striving, but through balance, self-care, and working with the body rather than against it. The story of Layman Pang and his family offers a wonderful example of how peace can be found within ordinary family life. Pang was a successful businessman who decided to simplify his life and practice Zen with his entire family. Rather than becoming monks in a monastery, they lived simply and practiced together while engaging in normal activities. The family was known for their light-hearted wisdom and natural ease. One famous exchange occurred when Pang's daughter Ling Zhao found him napping. "An old man sleeping in broad daylight," she teased. "Is that so?" Pang replied, pretending to be caught doing something wrong. Later, finding Ling Zhao napping, he used her exact words. "A young woman sleeping in broad daylight." She responded, "Is that so?" "Indeed it is," said Pang. Ling Zhao then remarked, "Just so, just so." And both laughed. This playful exchange demonstrates the light-heartedness and lack of self-importance that characterizes minds at peace. The story of Huineng being pursued after receiving Dharma transmission also illustrates profound equanimity. When a jealous monk named Ming chased him to take back the patriarch's robe and bowl, symbols of succession, Huineng simply placed these items on a rock and told Ming he was welcome to take them. Seeing Huineng's complete lack of attachment to status or recognition, Ming was humbled and asked for teaching instead. This demonstrates how true peace includes freedom from the need to defend status or possessions. Master Bankei's teaching style reveals another aspect of the peaceful mind. Instead of rigid practices or complex instructions, he taught what he called the unborn Buddha mind, our natural, unconditioned awareness that needs no improvement. When asked about difficult mental states, he often told students to simply rest in their original nature rather than fighting against thoughts. During one teaching session, a belligerent monk repeatedly interrupted, rather than having him removed. Bankei responded with complete equanimity, demonstrating the very peace he taught. The monk was so affected by this response that he became a sincere student. Contemporary accounts from the 20th century include the story of Suzuki Roshi, who brought Zen to America during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when nuclear war seemed imminent. A student asked him what we should do. Suzuki simply said, "Watch your posture, watch your breathing. Pay attention to what you're doing right now." This wasn't indifference to world events, but a reminder that peace begins with our direct relationship to the present moment, regardless of external circumstances. These stories share common elements. They show how peace comes not from escaping difficulties, but from meeting life directly with equanimity. They emphasize insight over intellectual knowledge. They demonstrate how true peace includes compassion and responsiveness. And they often contain elements of humor and lightness, showing that the peaceful mind isn't solemn or rigid, but naturally playful and alive. What makes these accounts valuable isn't just their inspiring quality, but their practicality. Each story contains implicit or explicit instructions, reminders to see beyond concepts, to maintain balance, to meet life's challenges directly without adding unnecessary resistance, to recognize our inherent wholeness rather than constantly striving for improvement. They show peace not as an exotic achievement, but as our natural state when we stop complicating our experience. The masters in these stories weren't superhuman, but ordinary people who applied the practices we've been discussing with extraordinary dedication and sincerity. Their achievements aren't presented as distant ideals, but as examples of what's possible when we work persistently with our own minds. Many became teachers precisely because they had struggled with the same mental agitation that affects us all and had found reliable methods to transform it. While these historical accounts might seem removed from our contemporary lives, their essence remains relevant. The human mind hasn't fundamentally changed. We still create suffering through attachment, resistance, and identification with thoughts. The path to peace still involves seeing clearly, letting go of fixation, and returning to the simplicity of present awareness. Modern practitioners continue to apply these same principles in the context of busy, complex lives and find them just as effective. One common thread running through many of these stories is the value of simplicity. Zen masters often lived simply, spoke plainly, and focused on the essentials rather than elaborating complex systems or accumulating possessions. This simplicity wasn't a superficial lifestyle choice, but a natural expression of their inner clarity, a recognition that peace comes from wanting and needing less, not from having more. This relationship between simplicity and inner peace forms a core principle in Zen philosophy. Unlike traditions that emphasize elaborate rituals, complex visualizations, or extensive study of texts, Zen tends toward minimalism in both practice and lifestyle. This simplicity isn't about deprivation, but about removing unnecessary complications that drain energy and scatter attention. The aesthetic of Zen reflects this principle. Traditional Zen temples and gardens are characterized by clean lines, empty space, and careful attention to essential elements. A rock garden like Ryoanji in Kyoto contains just 15 stones arranged in a field of raked gravel, nothing extra, nothing missing. This emptiness isn't sterile or lacking, but creates space for awareness to rest without constant stimulation or distraction. Japanese concepts like wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection and impermanence, and emma, negative space, express this aesthetic of simplicity. These aren't just artistic principles, but reflect the understanding that a cluttered environment often correlates with a cluttered mind. By creating physical spaces with only what's necessary, we support the natural clarifying of awareness. This principle extends to daily activities. In traditional Zen training, eating, cleaning, and other routine tasks are performed with full attention and minimal complexity. The famous tea ceremony, Chado, transforms the simple act of preparing and drinking tea into a profound practice through mindful attention to every movement. What makes it meaningful isn't elaborate decoration or complex procedures, but the quality of presence brought to simple actions. Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki captured this spirit in his famous quote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." This beginner's mind, Shoshin, values simplicity of perception, seeing directly without the filter of preconceptions, expectations, or accumulated knowledge. It suggests that mental peace comes not from having all the answers, but from being comfortable with not knowing. The simplification valued in Zen isn't limited to external conditions, but extends to our inner landscape as well. Many meditation instructions emphasize simplifying attention, returning to a single focus like the breath instead of entertaining countless trains of thought. When the mind wanders into complex narratives, judgments, or speculations, the practitioner gently brings it back to simple awareness of what's happening now. This inner simplification addresses a fundamental cause of mental agitation, what Zen sometimes calls the disease of many viewpoints. When we constantly analyze, compare, evaluate, and judge our experience, the mind becomes like a house of mirrors, reflecting endlessly on itself. By returning to direct perception before this proliferation of thoughts, we discover a natural simplicity and ease. The concept of having few desires appears frequently in Buddhist teachings, including Zen. This doesn't mean eliminating all wants or living in austerity, but recognizing how excessive wanting creates mental tension and dissatisfaction. By simplifying our desires, focusing on what genuinely contributes to well-being rather than what advertising or social comparison suggests we need, we remove a major source of agitation. Research in positive psychology supports this view. Studies consistently show that beyond meeting basic needs, increasing wealth and possessions has minimal impact on happiness and may actually decrease life satisfaction due to the stress of maintenance, comparison, and fear of loss. Conversely, practices like gratitude, which help us appreciate what we already have, reliably increase well-being. Modern minimalism movements share some characteristics with Zen simplicity, though they sometimes miss the deeper purpose. True Zen simplicity isn't about achieving a certain aesthetic or following rules about how many items to own. It's about noticing how our relationship with things affects our minds and creating conditions that support clarity and peace. Digital simplicity has become particularly relevant in our hyper-connected age. Many practitioners find that constant connectivity, information overload, and digital clutter directly impact their mental state. Practices like digital Sabbaths, periods without devices, simplifying online accounts, or mindfully curating information consumption can create space for the mind to settle into its natural clarity. The value of simplicity becomes particularly apparent during retreats or intensive practice periods, when external stimulation is reduced and activities are simplified. Practitioners often notice how much of their normal mental agitation comes from constant input and complexity. As external conditions simplify, the mind naturally begins to settle, revealing a peace that was obscured by busyness and complication. Importantly, Zen simplicity isn't about rejecting the world or avoiding engagement with life's richness and complexity. Many Zen masters were deeply involved in arts, education, and social action. The point isn't withdrawal, but engaging from a place of clarity rather than confusion, responding appropriately to genuine needs rather than being driven by compulsion or conditioning. The path towards simplicity often involves an initial period of apparent complication as we become aware of patterns we previously didn't notice. Like cleaning a long-neglected room, things might seem messier at first as we bring everything into awareness. This is a natural part of the process. Over time, as we continue to practice, unnecessary complications naturally fall away, leaving what Japanese Zen calls nothing special ordinary life, experienced with extraordinary clarity and ease. This understanding of simplicity as a path to mental clarity is beautifully embodied in the physical design of Zen temples. These structures aren't just places for religious ceremonies, but are meticulously crafted environments where every architectural element serves to calm the mind and support meditation practice. From their overall layout to the smallest details, Zen temples represent centuries of wisdom about creating spaces that naturally induce tranquility. When you first approach a traditional Zen temple in Japan, you'll typically pass through a series of transitions that gradually separate you from the noise and busyness of the outside world. Many temples are set against natural backdrops like mountains or forests, already creating a buffer from urban environments. The approach often involves walking along a path that may curve or wind rather than proceeding directly to the entrance, allowing time for mental transition and letting go of daily concerns. The temple grounds typically include carefully designed gardens that serve as spaces for contemplation and preparation for more formal practice. These gardens aren't decorative in the Western sense, but are created to calm and focus the mind. Dry landscape gardens, Karasansui, use carefully arranged rocks, gravel, and minimal vegetation to create abstract representations of nature that encourage quiet reflection. The famous garden at Ryoanji in Kyoto consists of just 15 stones placed in a field of raked white gravel, yet visitors can contemplate it for hours, finding new perspectives and relationships within this simple arrangement. The architecture of the temple buildings themselves incorporates numerous features that promote calm awareness. One of the most noticeable is the emphasis on natural materials: wood, paper, dot, stone, and clay, that connect occupants to the natural world and provide subtle, varied sensory experiences, unlike synthetic materials that might be perfectly uniform. Natural materials offer subtle variations in texture, temperature, and appearance that keep awareness gently engaged without overstimulation. Proportions and spatial arrangements in Zen temples are carefully considered to create a sense of balanced harmony. Traditional Japanese architecture uses the ken as a module for determining dimensions, creating spaces that feel naturally balanced rather than arbitrary. Ceilings are often built in relation to human height, creating spaces that feel neither cramped nor cavernous but appropriately scaled for human occupancy and activity. Light plays a crucial role in creating the temple atmosphere. Rather than using bright, direct lighting, traditional Zen spaces often feature filtered, indirect light that enters through paper screens, shoji, or wooden lattices. This creates a soft, diffuse illumination that's easy on the eyes and enhances the sense of calm. The quality of light changes subtly throughout the day, helping occupants maintain awareness of natural rhythms and the passing of time. The meditation hall, Zendo, is designed specifically to support sustained practice. Its proportions, orientation, and features all serve the function of helping practitioners maintain alert, stable awareness for extended periods. Sitting platforms, tan, are arranged to allow both privacy and community. Practitioners can focus on their own meditation while being supported by the group presence. The clear spatial organization removes decision-making about where to sit or how to arrange oneself, allowing attention to focus on the practice itself rather than environmental concerns. Sound, or its absence, is another carefully managed aspect of temple design. Many Zen temples are constructed to minimize external noise while allowing natural sounds like rainfall on tile roofs, wind through bamboo groves, or distant temple bells to be heard. These natural sounds serve as reminders of impermanence and can actually enhance meditative awareness rather than distract from it. The wooden floors of many temple hallways are designed to create gentle creaking sounds, known as nightingale floors, that bring walkers back to awareness of their movements and prevent mind wandering. The orientation of temple buildings often takes advantage of natural views and landscapes, incorporating them as extensions of the temple itself. A carefully framed view of mountains or a forest becomes a borrowed landscape, shake, that expands the sense of space without adding complexity. These views aren't random but are specifically chosen and framed to evoke certain qualities of mind, vastness, stability, or natural harmony. Color palettes in Zen temples tend toward natural, subdued tones rather than bright or contrasting colors that might stimulate or agitate the mind. Earth tones, the natural colors of wood, stone, and paper, and occasionally the deep vermilion of certain ceremonial elements create an environment that feels grounded and harmonious. This doesn't mean the spaces feel dull. Natural materials provide rich textural variation even without bright colors. Empty space is perhaps one of the most important materials in Zen temple design. The Japanese concept of ma, often translated as negative space or interval, is abundantly present. These empty spaces aren't voids but are actively designed elements that create breathing room for both the eye and the mind. Just as silence between notes is essential in music, these spatial intervals allow the occupied areas to be properly perceived and appreciated. The thresholds and transitions within temples are particularly important. Stone basins, tsukubai, for ritual hand-washing mark the transition to more sacred spaces. Low doorways might require visitors to bow slightly as they enter certain rooms, naturally inducing a shift in mental attitude. Even the raised wooden thresholds of traditional architecture serve as subtle reminders to maintain awareness when moving between spaces. For lay visitors, experiencing a Zen temple even briefly can provide a reset for an overstimulated mind. The careful balance of simplicity and detail, the thoughtful management of sensory input, and the overall sense of harmonious design create an environment where it's naturally easier to be present and aware than to remain caught in mental chatter. This explains why even tourists with no interest in Zen practice often report feeling unusually calm and centered after visiting these spaces. What's remarkable about Zen temple design is that it doesn't rely on opulence or spectacle to create its effect. Unlike some religious architecture that aims to overwhelm the senses or inspire awe through grandeur, Zen spaces work by reduction, refinement, and careful attention to human experience. The result is environments that don't impose tranquility but gently invite it, working with our natural tendencies rather than against them. These architectural principles extend beyond formal temples to influence many aspects of traditional Japanese design, from tea houses to private homes. The recognition that our physical environment significantly impacts our mental state has led to a rich tradition of creating spaces that support clarity and peace rather than stimulation and excitement. While we can't all live in Zen temples, understanding these design principles offers practical insights for creating more supportive environments in our everyday lives. Simple changes like reducing clutter, incorporating natural materials, managing light quality, creating transitions between spaces, and allowing for some empty space can significantly affect how we feel and think in our homes and workplaces. The calm-inducing qualities of Zen temples don't work through some mysterious or magical process, but through practical understanding of how environment affects mind. This recognition that external conditions influence but don't determine our mental state connects directly to another key Zen teaching: the practice of emotional detachment as a path to inner peace. Emotional detachment in Zen doesn't mean becoming cold, unfeeling, or disconnected from life. Rather, it refers to developing a different relationship with our emotions, one where we can fully experience them without being completely identified with or controlled by them. This nuanced approach allows for rich emotional experience while preventing emotions from creating ongoing mental agitation and suffering. To understand this practice, it helps to recognize how we typically relate to emotions. When a feeling arises, whether pleasure, anger, fear, or sadness, we tend to become completely identified with it. We don't think there's anger arising, but rather, I am angry. This complete identification often leads to automatic reactions that can amplify and prolong emotional states far beyond their natural duration. Zen practice offers a different approach. Through meditation, practitioners learn to observe emotions arising and passing in real time without immediately merging with them. This creates a small but crucial space between the awareness that notices an emotion and the emotion itself. Within this space lies the possibility of choice and freedom. The classic Zen metaphor for this relationship to emotions is the sky and weather. Our fundamental awareness is like the vast, open sky, while emotions are like weather patterns that temporarily pass through. Sometimes there are storm clouds of anger, sometimes sunshine of joy, sometimes fog of confusion, but the sky itself remains unchanged by these temporary conditions. Through practice, we learn to identify more with the sky-like awareness than with the changing weather of emotions. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or maintaining a forced detachment. In fact, genuine Zen practice often leads to more authentic emotional experience, not less. When we're not afraid of being overwhelmed by feelings or compulsively acting them out, we can allow emotions to be fully felt in the body. Paradoxically, this complete allowing often results in emotions processing more quickly and cleanly than when we resist or cling to them. In practical terms, emotional detachment might look like noticing anger arising during a difficult conversation and recognizing this is anger without immediately identifying with it or acting from it. The practitioner might observe the physical sensations associated with the anger, perhaps heat in the face, tightness in the chest, or a surge of energy in the arms, without adding a story about being wronged or needing to retaliate. This doesn't mean not responding to the situation, but the response can come from clarity rather than reactivity. Zen masters often demonstrate this quality in challenging situations. There are stories of teachers remaining completely equanimous when insulted, threatened, or even facing death. This isn't because they've suppressed their natural responses, but because they've seen through the solidity of both self and emotions. When you don't take emotions as defining who you are, they lose their compulsive power. The practice of non-judgment is crucial for developing emotional detachment. We tend to categorize emotions as good or bad, desirable or undesirable. This judgment creates a secondary layer of response. We feel bad about feeling angry, guilty about feeling jealous, or afraid of our fear. Zen practice involves observing all emotions with the same curious, accepting awareness, recognizing that emotions themselves are just energy patterns in the body and mind, neither good nor bad in themselves. This approach aligns with what modern psychology calls metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe our own mental processes as they occur. Research shows that developing this capacity helps reduce rumination and emotional reactivity while increasing cognitive flexibility and well-being. What Zen has known for centuries, science is now confirming through brain imaging and psychological studies. One common misunderstanding is that emotional detachment means never being moved or affected by life events. In reality, the most advanced practitioners often display great sensitivity and appropriate responsiveness to situations. The difference is that their responses arise from clear seeing rather than habitual patterns or self-protection. This allows for greater emotional intelligence and more skillful action. The regular practice of Zazen, seated meditation, builds the foundation for emotional detachment. During meditation, practitioners repeatedly experience emotions arising and passing without acting on them. This gradually strengthens the muscle of non-identification and teaches us that we can allow emotions to move through without being defined or controlled by them. Over time, this capacity extends beyond formal meditation into daily life. Another helpful practice is labeling emotions as they arise. Anxiety present, irritation arising, or joy happening now. This simple naming creates a slight separation between awareness and the emotion, preventing complete fusion while still acknowledging the feeling. The language we use matters. Saying, "I notice anger arising," has a different effect than saying, "I'm so angry." Body awareness plays a crucial role in emotional detachment. Many of us experience emotions primarily as mental stories rather than physical sensations. By bringing attention to how emotions manifest in the body, the tightness, warmth, tingling, or other sensations, we ground emotional experience in direct perception rather than conceptual elaboration. This often naturally dissipates the storylines that amplify and extend emotional reactivity. The peace that comes through emotional detachment isn't a flat, affectless state, but a dynamic equilibrium. Like a gyroscope that maintains its balance while spinning, the detached mind can experience the full range of human emotions while maintaining a core stability. This balance allows for both genuine emotional richness and the wisdom to not be completely defined or controlled by temporary feeling states. What makes this practice powerful is that it addresses one of the main sources of mental agitation, our tendency to create elaborate narratives around emotional experiences that extend their duration and intensity far beyond what's necessary or helpful. When we can experience emotions directly without these additional layers, we discover that even intense feelings naturally arise, peak, and subside when not fueled by conceptual thinking and identification. The practice of emotional detachment that we've been discussing isn't just for people living in monasteries or going on extended retreats. In fact, these principles and practices can be especially valuable for those of us navigating busy modern lives filled with commitments, technology, and constant stimulation. Learning how to integrate Zen principles into contemporary daily life might be one of the most practical applications of this ancient wisdom. Modern life presents unique challenges to mental peace. Many of us face information overload, constant connectivity through digital devices, packed schedules, work pressure, financial stress, and diminishing boundaries between work and personal time. These conditions can create a perfect storm for mental agitation, with minds constantly racing and attention perpetually fragmented. Yet it's precisely these conditions that make Zen practices so valuable. Adapting Zen principles to contemporary life doesn't require converting to Buddhism or adopting Japanese cultural practices. Instead, it involves understanding the core insights and techniques and finding creative ways to apply them within your existing lifestyle. Many people find that even small, consistent applications of these principles can significantly reduce stress and increase their sense of presence and peace. One practical approach is what some teachers call micro-practices, brief moments of mindfulness integrated throughout the day. Rather than trying to find an hour for formal meditation, though that's valuable if possible, you might practice 30 seconds of conscious breathing while waiting for your computer to boot up. Or bring full attention to the sensation of water on your hands while washing them. Or take 3 mindful breaths before checking your phone in the morning. These micro-practices serve as pattern interrupters, momentarily breaking the cycle of automatic pilot and bringing you back to present awareness. When practiced consistently, they create threads of mindfulness that run through your day, gradually changing your relationship with your own thoughts and the constant stimulation around you. The commute to work or school, often a source of stress, can become a valuable practice opportunity. Whether driving, using public transportation, or walking, you can use this time for breath awareness, noticing sensory experiences, or simply being present rather than immediately filling the time with phone use or mental planning. Some practitioners use red lights or stops as bells of mindfulness, reminding them to return to present awareness. Work itself, rather than being separate from practice, can become a form of meditation in action. The Zen tradition has always valued work, called samu in monastery settings, as integral to spiritual practice. Bringing full attention to your tasks, noticing when your mind wanders and gently bringing it back, taking brief moments between activities to reset your attention. These approaches transform ordinary work into opportunities for cultivating presence. Digital technology presents both challenges and opportunities for modern Zen practice. While constant connectivity can fragment attention, technology can also support practice through meditation apps, timers, online Sangha community connections, and access to teachings. The The key is using technology intentionally rather than reactively. Some practitioners establish tech boundaries like device-free meals or no screens an hour before bed, creating space for the mind to settle. Thich Nhat Hanh, who was particularly skilled at adapting traditional practices for modern life, suggested using everyday cues as bells of mindfulness. The ping of an incoming message can remind you to breathe and center before responding. The sound of a ringing phone becomes an opportunity to pause and collect yourself before answering. Even walking through doorways can serve as a reminder to notice. What am I bringing into this space? What state of mind am I in right now? Finding community support is especially important when practicing in the context of busy modern life. While traditional practitioners were often surrounded by like-minded people in monastery settings, contemporary practitioners might feel isolated in their efforts to cultivate mindfulness amid a culture of distraction. Online meditation groups, local Zen centers, workplace mindfulness programs, or even just one or two friends with similar interests can provide crucial encouragement and accountability. The principle of the middle way remains relevant when integrating Zen into modern life. Some people approach practice with excessive intensity, creating another source of stress and eventually burning out. Others are too casual or inconsistent, never developing enough momentum for practice to become transformative. Finding the sustainable middle, consistent but not rigid, committed but not obsessive, is key to long-term integration. Sleep, which is often compromised in modern life, deserves special attention from a Zen perspective. Rather than seeing sleep as just a physical necessity or downtime, it can be approached as an important aspect of practice. Creating intentional transitions before sleep, perhaps with a few minutes of meditation or conscious breathing, can improve sleep quality and create continuity of awareness between waking and sleeping states. Meals provide another daily opportunity for practice. Taking a moment to appreciate where food comes from, eating slowly enough to actually taste what you're consuming, noticing the sensations of hunger and fullness. These simple practices transform eating from automatic refueling to a mindful activity that nourishes both body and awareness. Many practitioners find it helpful to create a consistent framework for daily practice, even if brief. This might include a short morning meditation, conscious transitions between activities throughout the day, and an evening reflection or sitting period. This framework provides structure without rigidity, helping to maintain continuity of mindfulness amid changing circumstances. The principle of non-doing, Wu Wei, is particularly relevant to modern busyness. This doesn't mean becoming inactive, but rather finding the right balance of effort and ease, doing what needs to be done without the extra tension of rushing, worrying, or mentally being somewhere other than where you are. It's the art of doing without doing, accomplishing what's necessary without the additional mental agitation we often bring to our activities. When teaching meditation to busy people, contemporary Zen teachers often emphasize quality over quantity. 10 minutes of fully committed practice might be more beneficial than an hour of distracted sitting. This realistic approach acknowledges the constraints of modern life while encouraging genuine engagement with the practice. The increasing interest in mindfulness in corporate, healthcare, and educational settings has created new avenues for encountering Zen-influenced practices. While some traditionalists worry about dilution or commercialization, these adaptations have made valuable techniques accessible to people who might never enter a Zen center. The essence of the practice, learning to work skillfully with our own minds, remains relevant regardless of context. Perhaps the most important principle for integrating Zen into modern life is remembering that practice isn't separate from real life. Every interaction, every challenge, every joy, and every difficulty is an opportunity to cultivate awareness and peace. As one Zen saying puts it, "Ordinary mind is the way," suggesting that awakening isn't found in special states or perfect conditions, but in meeting our everyday experiences with present awareness. This recognition that practice happens within life as it is, not in some idealized circumstance, connects directly to another fundamental Zen teaching, the understanding of interdependence. This concept offers profound insights into the nature of reality and its direct connection to finding inner peace. Interdependence, or dependent origination, pratyasamutpada in Sanskrit, is the understanding that nothing exists independently or in isolation. Every person, object, thought, and phenomenon arises in dependence upon countless causes and conditions. This teaching isn't abstract philosophy, but a practical observation about how reality actually functions, and seeing it clearly has direct implications for our mental well-being. When we examine anything closely, whether a physical object, period, a thought, an emotion, or our own identity, we find that it doesn't exist in isolation, but emerges from a vast web of relationships and conditions. A simple cup of coffee, for instance, exists only because of the farmers who grew the beans, the rain and soil that nourished the plants, the people who harvested, processed, and transported the beans, the inventors and manufacturers of coffee-making equipment, the economic systems that made the exchange possible, and countless other factors extending back through time. The same principle applies to our thoughts and emotions. When we experience anxiety, for example, it doesn't arise randomly or in isolation, but emerges from various conditions. Perhaps physical factors like caffeine or lack of sleep, psychological factors like past experiences or future projections, social factors like work pressure or relationship dynamics. Seeing the conditioned nature of our mental states helps us relate to them with more perspective and less identification. Most significantly, this understanding applies to our sense of self. What we call I or me isn't an isolated, independent entity, but a constantly changing process shaped by biology, relationships, culture, language, experiences, and countless other factors. This doesn't mean we don't exist, but rather that we exist interdependently, not as separate, autonomous selves. The implications for mental peace are profound. Much of our suffering comes from the illusion of separation, the sense that we are isolated selves navigating a world of separate objects and people. From this perspective, we feel constantly vulnerable, needing to defend, promote, and satisfy this separate self against a potentially hostile world. This stance naturally creates anxiety, defensiveness, comparison, and other forms of mental agitation. When we begin to recognize interdependence, the boundaries between self and other start to soften. We see that we're not isolated individuals but participants in a vast web of life, constantly influencing and being influenced by everything around us. This shift in perspective often brings a natural sense of ease and connection that contrasts sharply with the tension of maintaining a separate self-identity. In Zen practice, interdependence isn't just understood intellectually but experienced directly. During meditation, a practitioner might notice how a thought arises dependent on a sound, which itself exists only because of the object making the sound, the air carrying the vibrations, the functioning of the ear, and the brain's interpretation. Or they might observe how an emotion emerges based on a memory, which itself depends on past experiences, which in turn were shaped by countless conditions. Through such direct observation, interdependence becomes lived experience rather than abstract concept. The metaphor of Indra's net from Huayan Buddhism, which influenced Zen, beautifully illustrates interdependence. It describes a vast net with a jewel at each intersection, each jewel reflecting all the other jewels in the net. This image conveys how each existence simultaneously contains and is contained by all others, with nothing existing in isolation. Understanding interdependence naturally leads to greater compassion. When we recognize that others' joy and suffering are not separate from our own, compassion arises not as a moral obligation but as a natural response to reality. If my well-being is genuinely connected to yours, then caring for you becomes an expression of intelligence rather than sacrifice or obligation. This perspective also transforms how we relate to the natural world. Environmental concerns become less abstract when we directly experience our interdependence with the air, water, soil, and other living beings. Our choices naturally shift when we recognize that harming the environment is ultimately harming ourselves, not in some metaphorical sense, but in the very real sense that we exist only in relationship with these systems. The peace that comes from understanding interdependence differs from peace achieved through withdrawal or isolation. It's not about escaping the world's complexity, but seeing it more clearly and participating in it more harmoniously. This peace includes engagement rather than detachment, responsible action rather than passivity. Practically speaking, we can cultivate awareness of interdependence in daily life by regularly reflecting on the countless conditions that make each experience possible. When eating a meal, we might consider all the people, natural processes, and labour involved in bringing food to our table. When feeling happy, we might notice the conditions that support this happiness, perhaps other people, favourable circumstances, or past actions that created current opportunities. This practice gradually shifts our perspective from one of isolation to one of connection. In relationships, recognizing interdependence helps us move beyond the simplified narrative of me versus you during conflicts. We begin to see how each person's behavior emerges from a complex web of conditions rather than from some fixed, inherent nature. This doesn't mean avoiding accountability, but approaching difficulties with more nuance and less blame, creating space for genuine resolution rather than continued opposition. The recognition of interdependence doesn't eliminate personal responsibility, but actually enhances it by showing how our actions ripple out to affect countless others. When we truly see our interconnection, we become more thoughtful about our choices, recognizing that they never affect just me, but participate in shaping our shared reality. For many practitioners, the direct experience of interdependence brings a profound sense of belonging and meaning that contrasts sharply with the alienation common in modern societies. Rather than being strangers in an indifferent universe, we recognize ourselves as integral participants in an intricate, meaningful whole. This shift in perspective often brings a natural peace that doesn't need to be constantly maintained but arises from alignment with reality as it actually is. This understanding of interdependence leads us naturally to another transformative Zen teaching, the possibility of transforming suffering into compassion and peace. While we might instinctively try to avoid or eliminate suffering, Zen offers a different approach, meeting suffering directly and using it as a catalyst for awakening and genuine compassion. Suffering is universal, no matter how privileged or fortunate our circumstances. We all experience pain, loss, disappointment, illness, and eventually death. The Buddha recognized this reality as his first noble truth. However, suffering becomes truly transformative when we approach it with the right attitude and practices rather than simply enduring it or trying to escape it. In Zen tradition, suffering isn't viewed as punishment or meaningless misfortune, but as a natural part of human experience that contains valuable teachings. When approached with awareness, even intense suffering can become a doorway to greater wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. This doesn't mean seeking suffering or romanticizing it, but rather working skillfully with the difficulties that inevitably arise in every life. The typical response to suffering involves resistance, avoidance, or denial. We might distract ourselves, blame others, numb our feelings with substances or activities, or construct elaborate stories about why we shouldn't have to experience this pain. While understandable, these reactions typically prolong and intensify suffering rather than transforming it. The Zen approach suggests a radical alternative, turning towards suffering with open awareness instead of turning away from it. This turning toward begins with acknowledgement. Simply recognizing this is suffering without immediately trying to fix or escape it creates space around the experience. Many practitioners find it helpful to name the specific form suffering takes. This is grief. This is fear. This is disappointment. This naming doesn't analyze or judge, but simply recognizes what's present, bringing clarity to what might otherwise be an overwhelming experience. The next step involves bringing mindful attention to the actual experience of suffering rather than getting caught in the narrative about it. What does this pain actually feel like in the body? What sensations, emotions, and thoughts comprise this experience we're labeling as suffering? This direct observation often reveals that what seems solid and permanent is actually a changing flow of sensations, thoughts, and feelings, none of which is as solid as it initially appeared. Japanese Zen master Shunryu Suzuki captured this approach when he said, "The most important thing is to find out what is the most important thing." When suffering arises, it naturally draws our attention to what truly matters. Physical pain makes us appreciate health. Grief highlights the preciousness of relationships. Anxiety about the future brings us back to the value of the present moment. In this way, suffering can clarify our priorities and values if we allow it to teach us rather than simply trying to escape it. This doesn't mean passively accepting preventable suffering or harm. The Zen approach distinguishes between pain that is inevitable and suffering that we add through our resistance and reactivity. Working skillfully with suffering includes taking appropriate action to address its causes when possible, while simultaneously developing a different relationship with the unavoidable aspects of human experience. A powerful technique in the transformation of suffering is what some teachers call turning the light around, or directing awareness back toward the experiencing itself rather than being completely identified with the content of suffering. This creates a subtle but crucial shift in perspective, from "I am suffering" to "there is suffering happening now, and I am aware of it." This small space between awareness and experience allows for a more skillful response. Personal suffering, when processed through mindful awareness, naturally awakens compassion for others. When we've intimately known our own pain and worked with it directly, we recognize the same patterns in others. This recognition dissolves the barriers that normally separate my suffering from your suffering, creating a natural resonance and concern for all beings experiencing similar difficulties. Zen teacher Joan Halifax speaks of strong back, soft front, developing the strength and stability to face suffering directly while maintaining an open heart that can respond compassionately. This balance prevents both the collapse into overwhelming emotion and the hardening into defensive indifference that can occur when confronting suffering. It represents the middle way between being overwhelmed by suffering and being closed off from it. Many Zen practitioners report that their most significant insights and transformations occurred not during periods of ease and comfort, but during times of great difficulty. There's the famous story of Zen master Hakuin who, during a period of severe physical illness and mental distress, received teaching from a mountain hermit about the soft butter meditation that eventually restored his health and deepened his realization. What initially appeared as an obstacle became the very path to deeper understanding. Modern neuroscience offers interesting perspectives on how mindfulness practices transform suffering. Research shows that while pain and emotional distress activate certain brain regions, our reaction to these experiences, resistance, aversion, elaborative thinking, activates additional areas, essentially compounding the neural signature of suffering. Mindfulness practices help decouple these reactions from the primary experience, allowing pain to be pain without the additional layers of resistance that intensify suffering. The compassion that emerges from transformed suffering has distinct qualities. It's not pity, which maintains separation between the sufferer and the one feeling sorry for them. It's not sentimentality, which often contains aversion to pain disguised as concern. True compassion acknowledges the reality of suffering without being overwhelmed by it and responds with presence rather than reactivity. It recognizes our shared vulnerability without reducing anyone to the status of victim. Specific practices support this transformation process. Tonglen, or sending and taking meditation, practiced in Tibetan Buddhism but adopted by many Zen practitioners, involves visualizing taking in the suffering of self and others with the in-breath and sending out relief, healing, and happiness with the out-breath. This practice directly challenges our usual tendency to avoid suffering and cling to pleasure, gradually transforming our relationship with both. Communities practicing together provide crucial support for transforming suffering. In Zen centers, the regular group practice creates a container where individuals can process difficult experiences with the support of others following the same path. For modern practitioners without access to traditional communities, finding or creating support groups, even small ones, can provide similar benefits. Suffering processed in isolation often remains stuck, while suffering held in supportive community more readily transforms into wisdom and compassion. The peace that emerges from transformed suffering differs qualitatively from peace achieved through avoidance or control. It's not dependent on perfect circumstances, but arises from having developed a different relationship with difficulty. This peace includes an understanding that suffering, like everything else, arises from causes and conditions and is impermanent. It comes with confidence that whatever arises can be met with awareness and worked with skillfully. Throughout Zen literature, we find stories of practitioners facing great hardship, illness, loss, persecution, yet responding with remarkable equanimity and even humor. These aren't tales of superhuman achievement, but examples of what becomes possible when suffering is approached as part of the path rather than an obstacle to it. They demonstrate that peace doesn't come from having a perfect life, but from responding to life as it is with wisdom and compassion. In our journey through these various aspects of Zen wisdom, we've explored many interconnected teachings and practices. From understanding the origins of Zen to the practical applications of mindfulness in daily life, from the recognition of impermanence to the transformation of suffering, each element contributes to the overall aim of calming our thoughts and finding genuine peace. What makes Zen particularly valuable in our contemporary context is its practical, experiential approach to peace of mind, rather than requiring belief in specific doctrines or adherence to rigid rules. Zen offers direct methods for working with our own minds, accessible to anyone willing to practice consistently. The emphasis on direct experience rather than abstract theory makes these teachings relevant across cultural and historical contexts. The various practices we've discussed, Zazen meditation, mindful awareness in daily activities, working with koans, cultivating acceptance, recognizing impermanence and interdependence, transforming suffering, aren't separate techniques but complementary aspects of a cohesive approach to human flourishing. Like different facets of a single jewel, they reflect different angles on the same fundamental insights about mind and reality. What emerges from sustained engagement with these practices isn't a state of perpetual bliss or freedom from life's difficulties. Rather, it's a profound shift in how we relate to all experience, a capacity to meet both joy and sorrow, success and failure, praise and blame with the same fundamental awareness and equanimity. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless, but developing a more spacious, flexible relationship with the full range of human experience. The peace that Zen points to isn't something that needs to be created or achieved, but rather something to be discovered by clearing away the mental habits that obscure it. Like the sun that's always shining above the clouds, this natural clarity and tranquility is our birthright, available whenever we step back from our usual patterns of thinking and reactivity. In a world increasingly characterized by distraction, division, and disconnection, these ancient teachings offer timeless wisdom for modern challenges. The mental habits that created suffering 2,500 years ago, grasping, aversion, and confusion remain the same today, even if they manifest through new technologies and social structures. The remedies, too, remain effective, developing awareness, cultivating compassion, and recognizing the true nature of mind and reality. Whether you approach these teachings from within a Buddhist framework or as practical psychology, whether you practice formally or informally, whether you're drawn to the philosophical aspects or the meditation techniques, the invitation is the same: to investigate your own experience directly and discover for yourself what creates agitation and what brings peace. This investigation isn't abstract or removed from daily life, but intimately connected with how we live each moment, how we relate to others, how we work, how we handle challenges, how we experience joy and sorrow. Zen isn't about escaping from reality into some special state, but about being fully present for reality as it is, with all its complexity, beauty, and difficulty. The various masters and practitioners who have transmitted these teachings through the centuries weren't superhuman beings, but ordinary people who committed themselves to this investigation and discovered something valuable they wished to share. Their diverse teaching styles and personalities remind us that there's no single model of awakening. Peace expresses itself uniquely through each individual while reflecting the same fundamental wisdom. As you continue on your own journey, remember that peace isn't a distant goal to be achieved after years of striving, but something available in each moment when we pause, breathe, and open to what's already here. The path has been walked by countless others who have left signposts and encouragement, but ultimately each person must discover their own way, step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment.